Good morning everyone, welcome to our video on chapter 6 life processes of class 10 general science. So in this chapter we are going to have a variety of life processes that goes on in our body. Now what do we mean by life processes? The first question, what is life processes? Now life processes are all the functions, the biochemical functions that our body undergo in order to keep it alive or in order to keep it in the survival mode so that we can survive. Now there are variety of these life processes that we undergo and our body undergoes in order to keep us alive and also in order to give us the energy to work. For example, now that I am talking to you, the energy that I have is because of one of the life processes. Now, so what are the life processes? If we look into the list of the life processes, we have digestion. You have all heard about the names of the different life processes like the digestion. Then we have respiration, we have our circulation, then we have excretion, etc. These are some of the life processes, but the most important life process is the nutrition, the food that we take in or the food that is produced by the green plants. This is nutrition. So that is the most important of the life processes because without nutrition, none of the other life processes would work. So in this chapter, we are going to deal with all these, but today in this video, I am going to give you an overview of what we have in this chapter. Everything we will discuss in very brief so that you get an idea of the whole chapter, and then we will move into details in our next video about each of the particular topics. So today let us talk about the overview. So first, as I said, nutrition is the most important of the life processes. Now how is nutrition taken? There are two ways. So we divide it into autotrophic and into heterotrophic. So autotrophic and heterotrophic life processes are the ways in which we take food. For example, you all know about this, you have studied this in your previous classes, that autotrophic nutrition is the type of nutrition in which an organism makes its own food, and heterotrophic nutrition is the type of nutrition in which an organism will depend on other organisms for their food. In case of autotrophic nutrition, let us take the example of any green plant. Now green plants contain chlorophyll. Using that chlorophyll, they trap the sunlight and convert the carbon dioxide that they take from the atmosphere into glucose. I hope that's clear. Chlorophyll is present in the leaves, they will trap the carbon dioxide. They will trap the sunlight. After trapping the sunlight, we know that plants breathe in carbon dioxide, that means they take in carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide is converted into glucose, the food molecule, using the energy obtained from the sunlight. So that's why chlorophyll is important for this process of photosynthesis. So this glucose is produced in the plants and they utilize it for energy. Now because they produce their own food, in case of green plants, they do not have any process called digestion. We'll come into that, why we need digestion, we'll come into this in a little bit, but if green plants do not require to digest food, the food that they produce is already in the simplest form and hence no more digestion is required. Now in case of human beings or in case of heterotrophic organisms, heterotrophism means to obtain food from other, depending upon other organisms for their food. For example, us, we human beings, we either depend on different plants for our food. You take into example anything, for example an apple, we depend upon a plant, the apple tree, for an apple. We also depend on other animals for our food. For example, we depend on chicken, we depend on goat, we depend on milk from cow or milk from goat, and there are many other examples where we depend on organisms, other animals for their food, and also plants. So there are some animals which will only depend on plants, which we call herbivores. Then we have carnivores who depend only on animals, and then we have omnivores, us, who depend on both plants and animals. So that means our food, the food that we obtain, is taken in from other animals. So as we take it from other animals and plants, so as we take it from other animals and plants, we take the food in a complex form. The food that we obtain is not very simple, it is complex because we take it directly from the other organisms. Now as the food we take in is in a complex form, it needs to be divided into smaller or simpler forms so that the body can absorb that food. And that is the process which is called the digestion process. And that is why us, that means the heterotrophs, we need to have a process called digestion, which the plants do not. Now what we are doing in digestion actually, suppose you take a piece of meat. Now the meat contains proteins. Now proteins are the complex form of amino acids, because amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. Just like we studied in our previous classes that in class 9 you have seen, cells combine to make tissues. So cell is the simpler form, tissue is the complex form. In the same way, amino acid is the simpler form and protein is the complex form. Our bodies can digest, our bodies can absorb amino acids and use it for energy, but our bodies cannot absorb proteins directly. So first the protein has to be broken down into small amino acids. Once the amino acids are produced, the body can absorb the amino acids and use it for producing energy. So how does digestion take place in our body? So protein is one of the type of food compounds. The other compounds are carbohydrates, lipids and fats. So these are the three major components of food. Now when we take in food, the digestion starts with the mouth itself. We have an enzyme called salivary amylase in our mouth which helps in digestion of carbohydrates. The food then moves inside, goes into our stomach, and in our stomach we have a combination of acid and enzymes. So in our mouth we have only an enzyme which will help salivary amylase. In our stomach we have an acid and an enzyme. So acid will actually help the enzyme to perform its function. The acid that we have is the hydrochloric acid and the enzyme that we have is pepsin. Now pepsin helps in breaking down protein, that means in digestion of protein, and HCl is very important for the functioning of pepsin, because if HCl is not there, pepsin will not work, because pepsin needs an acidic medium in order to function. In the same way, when the food, after the protein partially, not completely, partially breaks down in the stomach, and then the remaining food enters into the intestine, the small intestine. In the small intestine we have another enzyme called trypsin which will completely digest the protein, means it will break it down into amino acids, and then we have another enzyme called lipase which will break down the lipids and fats in the food. So it starts from the mouth, carbohydrates. Of course, it is not the only place where carbohydrate is digested. Carbohydrate is also digested in the different parts of our digestive system. But one of the examples given in our NCERT book is our mouth, where salivary amylase starts digesting carbohydrates. In our stomach we have digestion of proteins, and in our intestine we have digestion of proteins and fats. So this is how digestion takes place. After the digestion is complete, the food moves through the small intestine, and while moving through the small intestine, the walls of the small intestine will absorb the digested food. After absorbing the digested food, the food again moves into the large intestine. Even in large intestine, the extra water or the extra things which are required by the body but may have not been absorbed, those things are absorbed. The final absorption takes place in the large intestine. After that, the food, the undigested food, comes out through the anus, and that completes the digestion process. So now that the food is digested, it moves into it has to move to different parts of the body, that is into different cells, because after it has been absorbed, it goes into different cells of the body. How does it go? It goes through the blood flow. So here we have two separate processes. One is that how does it move? That is the blood flow. The blood flow is controlled by the heart, which is called the circulatory system. And the second thing is, after the food moves into different cells of the body, what does happen? Now the thing is, for our working, like I am walking right now, so for me to work, for me to talk, for me to think, I need some amount of energy. Where does this energy come from? This energy will come from a process called respiration. So what happens in respiration? After the food that we have taken in is absorbed and passed on to different cells of our body, the oxygen that we take in moves to all the cells of the body through the blood. So the blood will transfer the oxygen into different cells of the body, I mean all the cells of the body. Now in all the cells, using that oxygen, we break down or we burn our food to produce energy. This is called the process of respiration, where oxygen reacts with food to produce energy. This energy that is produced helps us to work. Now all the energy that is produced is not utilized at once, it is stored in the body. Now it is stored in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So in adenosine triphosphate, the energy is stored, and whenever our body is in need of energy, the ATP breaks and provides the energy. We will talk about this in details when we move into respiration, because this is a very interesting topic. Now respiration is also of three types. One is aerobic, what is anaerobic, and the other is in case of lack of oxygen. So we will talk about these as well. So how the energy is produced, what is actually the process and this energy that is produced is stored in the ATP. How does ATP store that energy? We'll talk about everything in detail when we move into our respiration part. So now that our body has energy, now the question comes, as I said previously, if you go back and think, that I said the oxygen moves to different parts of the different cells through blood. Now how does that happen? How does the blood carry all the oxygen? Now that comes into the function of our heart. Our heart is the pumping body which pumps blood through our body. So the regulation of blood flow is controlled by the heart. Now our heart is a 4-chambered organ. In case of human beings, heart is a 4-chambered organ. We have 2 upper chambers and 2 lower chambers. The 2 upper chambers are called the atriums, A-T-R-I-U-M, atriums, and the lower parts are called ventricles, V-E-N-T-R-I-C-L-E, ventricles. Now the left atrium and left ventricle, we have right atrium and right ventricle, and we will look into how the blood moves from different parts into the atriums and ventricles and then passes to different parts of the body. It is a very sophisticated process, a very beautiful process of how the organization has been made in the heart, of how blood can enter and exit. Now see, if you look into the respiration process, we take in oxygen, the blood carries this oxygenated blood into the different parts of the cells. After the respiration is complete, we actually produce carbon dioxide. Now this carbon dioxide has to be given out the way we exhale. This air is carbon dioxide. Now this carbon dioxide is produced in every cell after respiration. Now the blood will collect all those carbon dioxide and bring it back to the heart. From there it moves to the lungs, and from lungs we exhale. So when we inhale, the blood goes into the lungs, then into the heart, and then into the blood. And finally when it comes back, the carbon dioxide rich blood comes into the heart, then into the lungs, and then we exhale it out. The blood vessels that carry the oxygen rich components is called the arteries, and the blood vessels that carry the carbon dioxide rich component are called the veins. These, if you look into these parts of your body or this wrist part, you will see some bluish or greenish colored blood vessels. These are the veins. These veins will carry the carbon dioxide rich blood to our heart, and the arteries are red in color and they are present deep inside the skin cell. So that's why these are not visible. So now we know that we have a heart to circulate the blood, which will provide the oxygen to our cells. Now ultimately, after the digestion and the blood flow, we need to excrete the unwanted products or the harmful products, the toxins in our body, and we do that by the process of excretion. Now we know that our kidney actually helps in excretion. Now how does the kidney help in excretion? There is a cell called nephron, N-E-P-H-R-O-N, nephron, which is present in the kidney, which will help in the excretion of urea and other toxic substances from the body. Now how does nephron work and what is the function of nephron? We will look into that in details when we move to excretion. So after the excretion is done, the toxic components are excreted or given out from the body. So ultimately, if we look at the beginning of the chapter, where we started, we take in food, we digest it, we pass it to different cells, we take in oxygen, the oxygen will do the respiration to produce the energy. This energy we use for our metabolic activities or all the activities that we do in our lives. Then the food that is not required by the body will be passed out through excretion. And in the middle we have a heart which will help in the circulation of everything throughout the body with the help of blood. So that is in brief the whole chapter. From the next video we will move into different topics individually, we will discuss them in details. So what I want you to do is read up to digestion in the book. Take your NCERT book and read up to digestion. Once you are done with that, in the next video we will talk in details about digestion. I hope the video was clear to you today. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and if you have any problems, make sure you ask me in the comment section, or if you can ask me in your text message as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and until next time, cheers.